Hey guys, what's up? It is week 307. I have a bunch of reviews for you, so let's dive right into this. First up is the 1977-76 flick directed by John Frankenheimer from Arrow Films, Black Sunday. Not to be confused, of course, with the 1960 film Black Sunday by Mario Bava, the Gothic Italian horror classic. This is kind of a classic of its own, kind of different, obviously, than the other Black Sunday, but it has Robert Shaw and Bruce Dern in it. I'm a big Bruce Dern fan. Almost everything I've ever seen Bruce Dern in, he does a tremendous job, from The Burbs to Silent Running to Hateful Eight. Bruce Dern is just an amazing actor. He's been in a million films. So this one, this is a movie that I'd always seen in passing, and I really didn't know too much about it, but it's kind of in the vein of the disaster movies of the 70s, like Earthquake and Towering Inferno, Poseidon, Adventure, all those kind of movies like that, right? But it's a little bit different. It also has the terrorist kind of aspect, like Day of the Jackal and stuff like that, which Arrow also put out. So it's these kind of two different things here. So basically, this is based off a book, and it was inspired by basically the kidnapping of the Olympic team. A bunch of them were murdered. I think all of them were murdered, and somebody wrote a book off that, and that's basically kind of what this is coming from. So Robert Shaw is an Israeli kind of like equivalent to the CIA. And he's basically after this terrorist cell, and in the very beginning there's this amazing kind of like invasion of him and his team sneaking in and taking out all these terrorists, and there's a great chance when he has a time to take out one of the main terrorists, but it's a female, she's in the shower, and he kind of freezes up. He's a little older, he lets her go. Obviously, that will come to bite him in the ass later on. So apparently that terrorist is planning a huge kind of blimp explosion during the Super Bowl. And during this Super Bowl kind of stuff, we have a bunch of, people actually, Franco Harris that played for the Pittsburgh Steelers, all these kind of actual Terry Bradshaw football players that are there, which is really cool too, and they incorporate reality with the fiction, which is neat. But the first 2/3 of this movie, it's about 2 hours and I think 20 minutes or something along those lines. It's a fairly long film. The first 2/3 are kind of like the cat and mouse, Robert Shaw tracking these two terrorists down and all these other terrorists in the group, and you kind of see how they work and how they get everything together. And there's also attempts at both their lives, all these kind of things. Robert Shaw's in a hospital at one point. We have like a kind of a Godfather style almost killing there, all that kind of stuff going on there. We have a bunch of characters established and whatnot, but it all comes back to this final kind of conflict at the Super Bowl, which is really suspenseful. This movie's shot amazingly. John Frankenheimer is no stranger to action. Anybody's ever seen Ronin, or he also did The French Connection Part 2, and he did The Train as well. He did a bunch of movies, and later on in his career he did The Island of Dr. Moreau, the 96 version, which was taken away from Richard Stanley, which kind of didn't come out great, and The Reindeer Games, which didn't come out great. All sorts of stuff that was kind of crapped on later in his career, but early on in his career he had a lot of amazing films. John Frankenheimer also did Seconds. Just a really I guess, prolific and acclaimed director in John Frankenheimer. And this one is pretty great, to be honest. I was really taken back how it was shot. Some of the tracking shots, the crane shots, the helicopter shots, and the plane shots are all amazing. There's great how they cover the Super Bowl going around the stands and everything, how they'll be on like a car driving and they'll pull out and they'll go to the stands. And it's really funny too, because like I've been thinking a lot, back when you had shots like that, it was like a sign of like budget and quality and just like really hard to do. And nowadays when you see a shot like that, you just automatically, well, that's a drone and it's going to be a shot of this. It just becomes like this typical, very easy to do. When filmmakers had to struggle to do something, or some things were certainly limited, they kind of like thought outside their box. When everything's at their fingertips, somehow stuff becomes more stale. I know that sounds terrible, I know it is, but it's kind of like basically when I was a kid, I still do this, but a lot of people, they sought after a lot of things more. Now the internet, they have absolutely everything they could ever want at their fingertips, and it seems that a lot of people aren't as interested in, finding gems or deep diving into certain genres. They kind of just let the streaming services, whatever's put forth towards them, even though there's a million movies you could research online. So you have everything at your fingertips yet. So it seems sometimes when it's harder to do, it seems more special, or maybe it's just done a little bit better. I don't know. But anyways, the camera work here is phenomenal. The editing is interesting. But really what kind of won me over completely for this movie was Bruce Dern's performance. There's a scene in here where Bruce Dern is an ex-Vietnam vet, and he's basically, one of these people that is disenfranchised, just disgusted and disgruntled with America in general, and his family and everyone else, and he just generally seems like one of these characters that would carry out this kind of attack, and it's really kind of obviously hits home today because this problem has existed for a very long time. Shooters, terrorists, all these kind of domestic terrorists. It's been there forever, and a lot of the '70s movies really tackled it, and you see a lot of that in there. Like I said, The Day of the Jackal is another one that's really suspenseful and really intense. There's one from 1970 I'm trying to think of, which was about assassination attempt, which is really good that I watched. Kino put it out. I cannot put my finger. It's more of a thriller than a horror film, but kind of in that vein. I thought the casting, like I said, was great. The end shootout on the helicopters is phenomenal versus the blimp. I just love that stuff. Yeah, it's just a really special kind of movie, and there's some really twisted moments. It's violent too. When people get shot, the squibs go off. I didn't expect the violence, to be honest. The special features are pretty great on this. We have commentary by film scholar Josh Nelson. It Could Be Tomorrow, brand new visual essay by critic Sergio Angeli, exploring the film's adaptation and production. It's placed within the pantheon of 70s terrorism thrillers. That's very interesting. Learn a lot. The director is John Frankenheimer, an hour-long portrait of the director from 2003, including interviews with Frankenheimer, Kurt Douglas, Samuel Jackson, Roy Scheider, Rudd Steiger, and others. That's great stuff because it's kind of like a little frame on John Frankenheimer's past, and there's interviews and footage of him and all these famous actors talking about how to just work with him. It looks great. It sounds great. There's a 1.2.0 and there's a 5.1 surround sound, which comes across really great. There's subtitles, of course. It's region locked. Great release. I'm glad I watched this one. Really good stuff. Now I can say that both Black Sunday movies I've seen have been top notch. Good stuff. Okay, the next one here is continuing the Lukas Moodysson collection here. This monstrosity here, and the 9 films in here. And this is Mammoth from 2009. And this was the first time that Lukas got to work with, in English, making the film completely in English here. He had some kind of international stars in here, and Michelle Williams, and the other actor I can't think of off the top of my head, but he looks very familiar. I can't think. He's not an American actor. He's kind of universal. All the actors. It takes place over 3 different countries. I think Singapore, the Philippines, and the United States, if I'm not mistaken. So essentially, what we have here is a game tech guy who makes games and does the technology and all this kind of stuff, and he's like on a business trip in Singapore. And or is it the Philippines? I mix those. I'm gonna mix those two up. I'm sorry about that, guys. So essentially, he's kind of away from his wife and Michelle Williams, who's this surgeon who's always busy. They have a young daughter at home, and they have a nanny who pretty much from Singapore, the Philippines, those 2 countries I'm mixing up, basically takes care of the daughter, and it creates this kind of weird turmoil and these weird relationships amongst all of them. And they seem almost at first like completely separate, but as it goes on, they have a lot of same themes and interesting kind of motifs and parallels going on throughout the entire story. So essentially, like I said, we have the computer tech the gamer tech who's in this country, and he starts to have this relationship with this prostitute. And at first he seems to be almost as like kind of a protective nature towards her, but things start to get a little bit further than he wants, and that's kind of part of that going on. While at the same time, we have Michelle Williams, who feels like she's losing a connection with her child because she's overworking, she's lonely without her husband, all these kind of things of this family kind of separating and breaking up, one on a trip, one overworking, and then one basically daughter kind of not really focusing in on her parents, more so focusing in on the nanny or the live-in kind of maid who has a son back home and family back home that she's doing this to, 2 sons actually, she's doing all this for. So it's like this kind of thing, these sacrifices that people do for their families, and the maid and her have so much in common, yet she can't help but see her daughter being stolen away from her. There's a lot of interesting things happening here, and again, it does have like kind of a couple moments that are really shocking. It is a Lukas Moodysson movie, so that does tend to happen, but it shows you the kind of like where your priority should be or where you'll eventually come around to. All these kind of things that are interesting. It's a well-made drama. It's well shot. It's well edited. Definitely had a bigger budget than he's typically used to, and he had more stuff used at his fingertips, and he used it well. 3 different countries, 3 kind of main characters here, more than that, 3 basically storylines going on simultaneously, all of which are interesting and good. There's a great scene where one of the older sons from the maid is upset that his mother's not there, you know, and the grandmother says, "Do you want to see why she goes to this place?" And that scene's really amazing. I don't want to spoil everything, but I was really impressed with this one. I thought it was a really well made movie. This guy doesn't really make bad movies. It's just that a lot of them aren't exactly the number one interesting thing that I'm going to focus on. You know, I'm more into the horror cult westerns, but I love all films, and I think that Lukas Moodysson is a hell of a director. As far as the special features are concerned, we have new interview with Lukas Moodysson, moderated by film programmer Sarah Lutton. New interview with line producer Molt Forcell, moderated by film programmer Sarah Lutton. Short promotional interviews with Moodysson and Gail Garcia Bernal. So yeah, there we go. If anybody's interested in checking this one out, it's pretty good. And the box set keeps getting different, and they're all good films so far. Okay, now that we're getting close to ending the Lukas Moodysson collection, next week will be the last one. I'm starting another box set here, and this is from Intervision. That's right. And this is not typically something that's in my wheelhouse. You guys know how I've talked about these kind of movies where they seem to be failures that a lot of people laugh at or enjoy. I'm not so sure if they enjoy them ironically or not, I'm not sure. But this is The Wings of Disaster, the Birdemic trilogy. And I'm going to tackle the first Birdemic in here. All three are in here, of course, and all directed by the same guy. In 2013, if I can get this out of the box set here, in 2013, I believe he initially made this film. And it had like this immediate cult status. Like, it was kind of put on the same pedestal as The Room or Troll 2. It's a low budget film, a Birds ripoff, right? And it's by this Asian film director who's not American. But he went ahead and made this movie that originally I think he saw as this amazing suspense thriller or something along the lines. It's a story I've heard in the vein of an Alfred Hitchcock's Birds. He's a big Alfred Hitchcock fan. All his movies are inspired by that. But here we go. You know, some things are universal in terms of filmmaking, you know, editing or sound or, acting. That stuff, like, it's universal. But, like, a lot of times we'll have, people making movies in different countries about another country. So you get this weird disconnect where the person really doesn't understand the culture they're talking about. It happened in the 80s a lot if you look at stuff like Hack-A-Lantern. Or Open House, Jag. But those movies somehow, especially Hack-A-Lantern, aka Halloween Night, ended up having a sense of entertainment because although it is awkward and doesn't really feel like the person grasped the concept of Halloween, we still have, special effects, fairly well, decent cinematography, decent acting, decent score, the principles of filmmaking at least decently done. This is not the case. This is a movie where the director... It's a $9,000 budget, so it's like, it is what it is. There's tons of locations, so you got to give them props there. There's a lot of cast of characters in here, so you got to give them there. So it's ambitious, yes, although it is a remake of Birds. But everything else is just terrible. The script is terrible. The sound editing is terrible. The acting is terrible. The dialogue is terrible. The social message is ham-fisted and insanely annoying because it's every 3.5 seconds. It's basically message. It's just such a poorly written, poorly constructed film. Now, watching the special features, you can see that the director kind of embraced this. Like, he'll have screenings of it and say everybody that shows up gets a shot of tequila. So I feel like he is enjoying himself to a certain extent, but I can't help but think that there's a giant group of people that are just like kind of celebrating his failure and either laughing at him or laughing with him. Either way, it's just kind of a strange thing for me. It's not something I've ever really been into, you know what I mean? Where like the Sharknado movies are purposely bad and they know they're bad. Well, Birdemic started off as something that he was trying very hard, and a lot of people, seemingly a lot of people caught on that and they're laughing at it. The thing that interests me about the movie in general, the only thing that really does interest me is that it's obviously, it's part of, the cult world now in film and how it sits in that piece of history. Of course, it's there, but also the fact that you can see how a foreigner from a different country can interpret how America is, or he's basically trying to recreate that American dream. In the very beginning of the film, you see, well, I just made a big business deal. I'm making a lot of money. I'm doing great. I meet a beautiful supermodel. It's so on the nose. The joke where the streets are paved with gold, all that kind of land of opportunity, this kind of old mentality that people used to have when they thought of the United States of America. So that's there. And that kind of has that idea of like, that's kind of funny to see that and interesting. But the other things, the social and environmental messages are so in your face, it's insane. People come out and just say random things. It's just the editing, the sound editing is terrible too. From one scene to another, one cut, the person never got room tone. Just stuff like that. And it just, you hear the static in the back. You'll hear loud noises, jumps in audio. It's just, it's terrible. And like for me, the first 5-10 minutes, people are like, this is really bad. But then it's an hour and a half, and you're like, I've had enough. I get it. And like it does kind of fall into depths of more ridiculousness, right? And you could get some laughs out. This is a group film. You watch this with a group of people, you laugh at the failures. Not something I particularly like doing anyways, because hey, it's hard as hell to make a film, and this guy put his money up, and I'm glad he got some sort of success, but I can't celebrate this kind of stuff. It's not my thing. But the CGI is also abysmal. Comedic, of course. It's just abysmal in every aspect, and a lot of people, there's people out there that love this kind of stuff. They love doing the riff rack tracks, whatever they want to do at their home, the Mystery Science Theater treatment. They love doing that stuff. Or maybe they just enjoy that this guy went out and had fun making a movie. I guess the other ones would probably be more self-aware after this one came out, but I've never watched The Room either. It just doesn't tickle my fancy. Like stuff like Troll 2, yes, I get that it's bad, and I don't love Troll 2, but I do enjoy some aspects of Troll 2. A lot of, the Bruno Mattei movies, this sucks. It's like, yes, they're ridiculous and silly, but at the same time, I kind of like them. But they actually have stuff that is not easy to do. Explosions, they have character actors. They have stuff that is like a real film. They're on location. Like, these aren't. So I'm sorry to say that. The cops are coming, the bad movie police are coming to arrest me if you heard that siren in the back. But as far as special features are concerned, this looks like the old disc that they released under the Severn label. And then they have 2 and 3 on the Intervision label here. Audio commentary with director James Nugent. Audio commentary stars Alan Begg and Whitney Moore. Deleted scenes, Birdemic Experience Tour featurette. James Nugent on movie close-up. Movie head, the James Nugent story teaser. Birdemic Experience teaser trailer, all that kind of stuff here. So, yeah. He basically calls himself the master of the romantic thriller. So it is what it is. Most of the actors didn't go on to do anything else, but I think Whitney Moore did. It's just there's characters introduced, and then 5 minutes later they're killed in a very dramatic death. It is whatever. It's not good, and this is but this is for certain people, and you'll know if you'll like it or not. It's a very niche kind of thing for people. So it's Birdemic. Shock and terror. Who will survive? Hopefully the viewer. Okay, next up is one from Vinegar Syndrome Archive, and this is Dog Tags, aka Platoon from Hell, I believe. And this was made in 1987. It's directed by Romano Scofolini, and if that name sounds familiar to you, it's because he directed the 1981 kind of slasher, sicky Nightmares in a Damaged Brain. This actually stars the lead guy from Nightmares in a Damaged Brain, and this is a really crazy, weird Vietnam film from 1987. It's an hour and 50 minutes long, but I must read on the back here, this is newly scanned and restored in 4K from its 35mm interpositive. Now this freaking thing here, it was basically, and they didn't know where the English long version was, and they found it, and they kind of like put this together, and the all like long cut is from my understanding. So like originally, if you saw this on bootleg or on VHS, this is a different cut. I thought this looked tremendous, like physically, like visually, it was amazing. Like I thought this was much better looking than I thought it would look. As far as the elements, they must have done a really great job, and it was a better movie than I expected. I didn't really know what to expect. I had seen Nightmares in Damaged Brain, and it was a taken fairly serious kind of slasher maniac style thing, Halloween maniac kind of mix. But this one was more serious. I watched a lot of the Italian kind of Vietnam movies. If you have like the Bruno Mattei movies, but then you have the Antonio Margheriti movies like Cannibal Apocalypse, which I love, The Last Hunter, Tiger Joe, all those kind of movies, The Last Tornado, all these kind of Vietnam movies, non-exploitation. But I didn't expect this one to be as sincere as it was. And a lot of the other ones I feel are more exploitative, although I love them. Cannibal Apocalypse, I think, is a masterpiece. I love that movie. But a lot of them, like Last Hunter, although it has a dark tone and it does saying something, I think it is more exploitive than this, even though this has nasty stuff going on too in it. So essentially what we have here is there's a couple of guys, and they break out some of their troop out of this Vietnamese jail right in the beginning of the film. Basically, there's a structure where somebody's going to basically keep saying that way too much this week. But the guy is going through, and he's kind of explaining a story, and he's talking to someone to learn of the story. So it's basically bookend by this reporter of sorts, journalist, finding the story. And then the middle center is this huge chunk, this Vietnam adventure. I say adventure lightly. It's hell. It's complete hell. But 4 or 5 people are trying to escape from this Vietnamese prison. A couple guys break them out, and there's like a German photographer in there. There's Jim Gaines from Zombie 4 After Death. There's a couple other familiar faces. Of course, you have Bird Stafford from Nightmares and Damaged Brain. And this group of guys, while they're waiting to get evacuated, they get a call from a commanding officer who's in a captain something. He's Newscomb. He's in a million movies. A lot of these kind of Philippine movies, Italian movies shot in the Philippines. And basically, he tells them, no, you guys have a job to do. You have to find this downed helicopter and get the contents out and be picked up. So throughout the entire film, they're on this mission going through the jungle, and there's this thick fog, and it just seems miserable. It's beautifully shot, although it's scary. There's lots of great scenic stuff, and eventually they get picked off until they find something special in the cargo pit of the plane in the water, which is a great scene, and they decide to do something with it. But it's about corruption, not just a war. It's about corruption within the war. So the acting is really solid. For the most part, I think all the actors, the major players, are good. I think that the cinematography is great, especially the last shot and the shots of like the fog and people walking in. I think the special effects are really solid. Somebody has a leg amputated, which is really nasty. And I think the sets are great. They built all those sets, the cave, all great stuff. Way better than I expected, to be honest. The movie's much better than expected. Now, I do prefer Cannibal Apocalypse and The Last Hunter, though. You know what? This one could beat The Last Hunter eventually. I think on another watch, I think I would appreciate how well done and serious it is, to be honest, and saying something. And it's very interesting that the director was actually a Vietnam photographer. He freelanced and he took pictures for France and Italy and all that kind of stuff. And he has an interview on here and he talks about that. It's like 50 minutes long. He talks about how he got in there to Vietnam and was taking the photography and how the film got its production. All that stuff super interesting. How Oliver Stone basically was asking, his production was asking him how they were getting dailies while they were in the Philippines. Super interesting stuff here, to be honest. And I have to admit, this is a really good release. This is a really solid release. This is the kind of releases I like to see. Movies that, I never thought would get Blu-ray. Movies that I heard about in passing but didn't know how good they were. Maybe one person would be like, yeah, it's pretty good. That's it. That's all you ever hear. But no, this is a damn good movie. This is a strong film. It's well made, much better made than you would expect, and dark and depressing, and just interesting too at the same time. So basically on here we have newly scanned and restored 4K from its original 35 interpositive, The Dogs of War 52-minute interview with writer-director Romano Scalvini, accepting the mission 8-minute interview with executive producer Arthur Shawalzer, alternate ending from international version, trailer, teaser, all that kind of stuff there. But anyways, great stuff. I recommend you pick this up from BSA if it's still in stock. This is one of their coolest releases, I think. Okay, next up, it was sent to me to review by Harry Collins, aka Nathan Hine, and it is Homicidal Harry. Now, I can't remember the director's, I'll mispronounce the director's last name, so I'm not going to try, but it's actually directed by a first-time director who pops up in some of Harry Collins' movies and helps on a lot of the independent stuff there. Bob, also, I'm sorry about that, Bob. I probably mispronounced your name, so I'm not going to bother saying it. My bad. He also has a role in the film, but yeah, Harry Collins and his whole crew and all the people that make films there are really nice guys. Harry Collins did the Sidling Hill movie. He had a couple more, Last Days of Livermore, if I'm not mistaken. So really cool guy. He actually popped up on the channel, and his friends he's also a nice guy. Met the director of this one. So essentially, yeah, this one is a basic kind of a plot in a lot of ways on paper. A mentally, damaged person, a person with a lot of mental illness and violent tendencies, is released from a group home because in this way is fun. They basically say that politicians they can't hold people here indefinitely. Prison guard there is not very happy about it. He is released, and he goes on a crazy killing spree until he finds, he has an initial run in until he finds this kind of abandoned house, the Brinkner house, and makes it his own, makes it a bloodbath house. So essentially, this movie is following Harry Collins' character around, and Harry is this kind of a hulking kind of guy, and he has an inner monologue. He has voices in his head, and eventually after he gets his kind of mask, this is kind of like the birth of a slasher, right? He gets his little iconic mask that he wears in his videos. He gets this mask, and they kind of show when the voices take over, they become that mask, and they're talking to him. So he always has the voices in his head, and he stops taking his medicine, and it's just kind of pushing him over the edge. Kind of reminds me a bit of old Buttonface from Nightbreed, the original book, and in the Cabal, the Clive Barker book. The mask would talk to him, old Buttonface. face and tell Decker to kill people. And that's kind of what we have here. The mask kind of pushing him forward to commit these murders. So essentially, it totally, I would say it's a little strange because it's dark in places and messed up and saying some things about people being released or that shouldn't be released, all this kind of stuff there. But at the same time, it does have an element of dark comedy. Harry Collins dumping the bodies out the window off the roof is clearly played for a comic gag visually, and it works. My favorite part of the movie, Harry Collins is pretty good in this. Nathan Hine, he's good. He's solid. You believe him. He's big. He's scary. He's goofy too. He's like kind of like a silly killer, but scary at the same time, if that makes any sense. But the best gag to me was a pair of ghost hunters show up. Darren Ricci and the director. Darren Ricci, I think, is a cinematographer. I know he's done cinematography on some of his other movies, but essentially one of his regulars that helps him on his films and other films I believe he works on. So they show up and they're these ghost hunters, and I'm sorry, I always tend to laugh at the ghost hunting stuff, and it's silly to me. I'm sorry, not to judge anyone, but a lot of the stuff is just ridiculous, and they're obviously playing into that. But Darren is just hilarious in this because he's like, I feel bad vibes here. I feel blood, and this whole part is really funny. And of course, they're going to run into Harry Collins. It's gory. It has some gore here and there, some nastiness. Of course, there's going to be gore from Harry Collins. He's got to have it in there. Homicidal Harry, he's got to have it. I like the name. It's a good creation of a character, of a slasher. I like where it's shot too. It's got good Pennsylvania vibes, which I dig. And I just like movies that are shot in this location. I love all, Romero's my favorite. So, and this one does have a regional quality. His films tend to capture that regional quality. Nobody really has any input. He's not out there making movies for anybody but himself. These guys are out there making movies for themselves. All their movies that they work with. I remind you, Harry Collins did not direct this. I want to make sure everybody knows that. But like they all are out there. They seem like they have a regional quality. They're making their movies for themselves. They're not, hey, can we get this in a Blockbuster? Not Blockbuster's dead, but can we get this in a Redbox? It's the Amityville Ouija curse or the Amityville Shark Ouija curse. Like, it's not that shit, right? It's not that kind of low budget shit. There's a charm to it. There's a DUI to it. So if you're interested in Homicidal Harry, check it out. It's gory. It's weird. It's the story is pretty straightforward, but there's some nice little quirks and touches that I really enjoyed. And if you watch his YouTube channel, check it out. I think you'll enjoy him in it. And like I said, I'd like to continue to see Bob do more movies. I'd like to see Harry Collins do more movies. I know he's got Collins and Company coming out. So yeah. Anyways, and it's kind of strange. You see, Harry Collins is not actually the actor's name. It's Nathan. And he plays this character, Harry Collins, kind of weird thing on his YouTube channel. It's like a elaborate kind of weird thing there. It's kind of cool, really, to be. It's kind of alter ego deal thing, and he's like a character and whatnot. So yeah, check it out, Homicidal Harry. There'll be links below. I'm not sure if it's out just yet, but it should be. We just had a gory movie in Homicidal Harry, and I think I'm going to top it with this one. This is Project Wolf Hunting, and this is a South Korean film. Right when I heard about this, I was like, I definitely got to check this one out. The runtime is about 2 hours and 2 minutes, so yeah. I rarely see a non-great South Korean movie, I'm going to be honest. So I saw the trailer on this and I was like, that looks totally up my alley. And this is kind of in the vein of, like a splatter horror film, but less horror, more splatter action, but it has horror obviously in it. So essentially what we have here is a group of like 40 criminals that fled to the Philippines from South Korea. They're all being extradited back to South Korea. They get this giant freighter because they had previous problems. They get a giant freighter. There's a group of police officers on here, detectives, like hard-boiled, tough-ass detectives on here as well. And then there is also, people that work on the ship, the captain, the people in the boiler room, all those kind of people. But in the very bottom of this boat is this kind of crazy super soldier. It's kind of like a universal soldier. It's kind of like Predator. It's kind of like a zombie. It's all these kind of things together. It's in the bottom of the boat. Its eyes are sewed shut. It's rotting. It's gross. But what happens is there is a prison break on here. There's a couple guys who aren't who they say they are, and they're trying to break some of these gangsters out. Blood is spilled on the zombie, And now we have cops fighting these criminals. We have the criminals and the cops having to team up and fight this monster. And this monster is a one-man killing machine. It picks guys up, breaks their necks, turns them to goo. So essentially, the first hour of this movie, I would say, was phenomenal. You know, we have the setup, we have all these characters. There's a lot of funny lines. There's a lot of established characters, a lot of goofy criminals. All look pretty different and memorable, like weird shirts or quirks or stuff like that. The cops are memorable. Everybody in here, you're just like, oh wow, there's a lot of ruthless bad guys. There's a lot of good established characters for how many there are, and then we start to pick them off, and it's really entertaining. But then about I like this movie. Don't get me wrong, I really do. I really enjoyed this film. I think it's pretty great. But about the second half of the movie, we kind of dive into more of the like superhero kind of style movie. It's like almost like a Weapon X program. The whole thing seems like a big Weapon X program. You know, old Wolverine's Weapon X program. So that's kind of what happens here. And I'm not gonna lie, I didn't enjoy the last act of the movie that much. It was fine. The action was cool, the blood, the gore, the fighting, but I was digging this more when it was smaller and more like personal and more contained. When we kind of branch out, which is rare, right? When we kind of branch out and start introducing these other elements to the story, I'm just like, I don't really need an explanation. I really don't, and I don't like it, and I know it opens it up for more of a sequel or a bigger world, but I just don't care. I would have been perfectly fine with the one zombie creature or this one unstoppable monster on a boat with 40 criminals and 20 cops and 10 fucking passengers and whatnot, and they have to survive against this monster. That's fine enough. And they keep adding like story elements to it where I'm like, I don't care about any of this. This doesn't interest me. It's very, hey, a little bit of Marvel, DC in there. I don't need it. Like, I mean, if all superhero movies were this cool, though, I'd like them all. But Project Wolf Hunting is great. The special effects are great. They do get kind of repetitive in the kills. You're like, there's a lot of old guys getting their necks broken, and I don't mind because the practical stuff's great in here. But they could have spiced it up considering that some of the people's deaths are amazing. But it's still good. Really enjoyed it. Really great stuff. Probably will make my top 10 of the year. I can't imagine 10 movies better than this, to be honest. But the runtime it's 2 hours and 3 minutes, a little long. There's some special features behind the scenes making the alpha, and there is like a K-pop star in this, and he's like a all like out gangster. He's completely tattooed, and you could tell like whoever made it or whoever wrote it, whatever, somebody's in love with him because he's naked a lot and stuff like that. You're just like, there's like going down his body. It's like, this happened a couple times, and maybe there's like doing it for the audience because he's such a popular person, is from my understanding. But hey, it's fun, it's good. I would recommend it. Check it out. It's a lot of crazy fun. All right, we're going to get to those 1981 movies.
Woe be unto him who opens one of the 7 gateways to hell, because through that gateway, evil will invade the world.
they say on a Valentine's Day is a curse that'll live on, and no one will know as the years come and go of the horror from long time ago. In this little town, when the 14th comes round, there's a silence and fear in the air. Remember the morn that the legend was born, all the shock and the horror was there. Or the legend, they say, on a Valentine's Day is a curse that'll live on, and no one will know as the years come and go of the horror from long time ago. And no one will know as the years come and go of the horror from long time ago.
First up is an Alien ripoff, of course, and it's also a precursor to The Thing. And this is a VHS. It's a cut box. Look how bad this is cut. Whoever cut this did a terrible job. This is The Intruder Within, a TV film. And who is the main guy in here? Chad Everett. He's pretty good in here. There's a couple other kind of like loosely familiar faces in here. And I had never watched this one, but hey, it's 1981. It's time to check this out. And I remember always, Elric Kane always talking about how great this one was. And pretty good for a TV movie. Although it does not compare to Dark Knight of the Scarecrow from the same year, also a TV film. But The Intruder Within. So it opens up and we got really good kind of scenery here. I mean, really good atmosphere. It's drilling, offshore drilling here. All the characters are pretty well established. They feel real. You know what I mean? Chad Everett and his crew feel real. And it's mixtured with like a lot of females on the boat too, which I thought was pretty cool. In the very beginning, a couple guys get injured. They're all stressed out. There's a geologist on boat and he's like, we got to keep drilling. We got to keep drilling. And everybody's confused why they're drilling so deep. Of course, you know, there's somebody's up to something. You got Burke basically from Aliens here, or Ash or somebody, you know, that character, right? Who's more concerned about the scientific finds than anybody's life. They're in every one of these kind of movies. We have one here in The Geologist. So essentially, Chad Everett's concerned. Then this guy has a premonition in the very beginning that something bad's going to happen. And of course, you know it's going to happen. It's a horror film. What happens is this creature jumps with the drilling. It comes to the water pump and it looks kind of like a really low rent xenomorph, but at the same time it looks more like that screaming little baby creature Leech from Class of Nukem High that came out 5 years later before it grows. So that thing it attacks this guy and bites him and he dies, and you're like, he's going into shock. Maybe this thing's venomous. They get it off the boat, but there's some rocks, some strange rocks that have come up, and basically these rocks, you know, anybody who touches them kind of gets infected. They kind of go mad. So at the same time, a bunch of people are going crazy. Instead of like we thinking there's going to be an alien, we have this kind of all these people going nuts on boats, people getting thrown overboard, until the finale where we have, of course, this kind of like creature that's style xenomorph or something along the lines of Scared to Death, you know, just like a big juggernaut kind of creature deal, or like a zoonoid from Guyver. And that's kind of the movie. Now, the first half of the movie, establishing characters and setting everything up, is really cool, really fun. But it kind of loses steam, gets really dull, gets really repetitive. It's not anything that you haven't seen before, and it's not as good as Alien. Of course, it's not as good as The Thing, which would come later. It's decent sci-fi horror on a like offshore drilling, which is a cool location, right? And the acting, I really like the lead, but for the most part, I mean, you could probably skip this one. Maybe just give it a peek. It's on YouTube. It's not horrible. I just don't see this making any top 10 list at all. The Intruder Within.
Then, at a special time, someone's finally gone too deep.
There's death here.
Something's finally been awakened. The Intruder Within, followed by the Democratic reply to the presidential address.
All right, now to follow up one Alien ripoff with another. Now this is from the Roger Corman school here from 1981. This is Galaxy of Terror. I love Galaxy of Terror. I've watched this movie for years. Now, I've talked about this one. Of course, it's got a great cast. James Cameron worked on here before he went on to direct Piranha 2 from 1981 and go on to do The Terminator and all these classic movies. But he worked on this one, and you can tell the production design's really great. Besides that, who directed it is Bruce Clark, who I don't know too much as a director, to be honest. But the cast in here is top-notch. And mostly the supporting cast. I mean, you got Sid Haig, you got Robert Englund, you got Solomon King, you got Grace Zabinski. Who else is in here? I feel like I'm missing. Eddie Albert is in here. Ray Walston. You got a great cast. So it's a really amazing cast. I feel like I'm missing like one other person. Oh, Aaron Moran. Yeah. So basically a wonderful cast in here. And this is a strange thing. So a group of people are looking for a distressed call alien. Right. People disappeared on this planet, is from my understanding. They're sent there by the creator. At the very beginning of this movie and the very end, it's very sci-fi, 100% sci-fi. The whole movie's sci-fi, but it's more sci-fi fantasy instead of sci-fi horror. In the very beginning, we have the master, whose face is illuminated by light constantly, and he tells these people, I handpicked this crew to go out there and try to find the survivors of this. Right when they get there, they kind of know something's wrong. People are picked off fairly quick, and it's by all different creatures, all different ways. So you're like, is this galaxy, is this planet basically a giant planet of different monsters or whatnot, but it ends up being a planet that preys on people's fears, which is funny because you got Robert Englund in here, and 3 years later after this he would be in Nightmare on Elm Street, dream demon that uses people's fears in their dreams to kill them. So this planet basically knows your deepest, darkest fears, and it uses them against them. So you get an array of random ass fears, including a giant cockroach, worms that come out of the walls, a giant slug or maggot that rapes people, crystals, doppelgangers, and suffocation, no breathing. Crushing, I guess, is what I'm looking for. You see like that sly Papa Roach reference in there. But yeah, so you see what I'm saying? Like, it's completely ridiculous in a lot of ways, and at the very ending, like, is the last 3 minutes. I'm like, why though? Why? Also, a shadow creature, which is really badass. So, what I really like about this movie, besides the B movie cast, is the set design's great. I like everybody in here; it's really solid, and the gore. This thing is fucking gorier than I expected, than I remembered, to be honest. And of course the classic line of Sid Haig, I live and die by the crystals, which is fucking hilarious. Yeah, this is a really entertaining movie, like I said. The rape scene is bonkers. They're like, we want to recreate that humanoids from the year before, where you get some more rape in here. But the rape is just like, what the fuck is this? But at the very end, of course, the character has to face off against everyone else's fears. But what are his fears then? Who knows? Who cares? But I really enjoyed this one. Great set design, great atmosphere, good gore, good monsters. A really fun movie on a budget. And the cover art, man. The cover art on this movie had always grabbed my attention. I think I let my grandpa rented this for me when I was a kid. Like, please, you gotta let me see this one. That cover art's amazing. It looks like classic Conan the Barbarian comics, the covers for them. But I don't think the tape worked as a kid. Probably for the best, honestly. I was probably like 8 or 9. But yeah, this is great. This is an old Blu-ray. I think they re-put it out on a steelbook with 4K, which I will pick up, but I'm waiting for a 4K of this at this point. So you have commentary with cast and crew. New Worlds. Producer Roger Corman, screenwriter Mark Ziegler, and director Bruce D. Clark discuss the origins of the film. The crew of the quest, actors Robert Englund, Sid Haig, Tafato Kano, and Grace Zabinski discuss their experiences as crew members of the quest. Plan of course a detailed look into the creation of the film's memorable sets and alien landscapes. Future King, memories of the co-production designer and future visionary filmmaker James Cameron from members of the cast crew. Old School, a journey into the complicated mechanical and makeup effects with artists Alan A. Apon, Douglas J. White, Alec Guinness, and others. Launch sequence. Co-editor R.J. Kaiser walks us through post-production and profile on the composer Barry Scheider. Yeah, this is great. Seeing the interviews with everybody is very fun. This is like amazing. Like, all these special features on here for just like back in the day when Scream Factory would sell this for like $13. God, times have changed, right? Okay, another Scream Factory here, and another James Cameron joint, right? We just talked about Galaxy of Terror, which he worked on, but now we're going to talk about Piranha 2, The Spawning. So, okay, I was looking at reviews on this, and everybody's like, that's the worst movie ever made. It's like, guys, if that wasn't directed by James Cameron, A, would you have watched it? Because most of us like these kind of B movies that watch this stuff. Or B, are you holding it to a higher standard? And I heard somebody once say that, like, the Spielberg, great movie, but like, it'd be a great movie by anyone else, but since it's Spielberg, people give it a 2 or 3 out of 5, even though it'd be a 4 out of 5 or something from anyone else. And I wonder if people hold James Cameron to a certain like caliber, and I can understand why, but I tend not to do that when it's their first movie, movie, whatever. And Piranha 2 is a lot of fucking fun. It's produced by Ovidio Osasantanadis or whatever. I believe he's is he Greek or Italian? I know he worked on a lot of Italian films. I believe he's Italian, or maybe he's a Greek that lives in Italy. I'm not 100%, but he would do Beyond the Door, the ripoff of The Exorcist, and he also did Madhouse from 1981. He produced The Visitor. He is a bizarre character, and his hands were all over this movie. So, and this is part of the reason I think James Cameron disowned this one. So what we have here in Piranha 2: The Spawning is, of course, this kind of community or like this tourist location, right? Think of every sea creature horror film or animals attacks movie you've ever seen. We can't close down the beach. We can't close down this park. We can't close... We're going to do that here too. So remember the first movie, the piranha got into the ocean. I guess they're kind of leaving that. A boat, basically, with a bunch of like these little eggs has crashed, and that's essentially what's going on here. And these things are mutated. Now they can fucking fly. It doesn't get any more ridiculous than that. But you know what I love about this movie is, if this was made nowadays, like Sharknado or something, or Sharktopus or something like that, although this movie is silly and weird and goofy, it's taking itself fairly serious. It's trying. The special effects are solid. It's entertaining. It's not like, hey, we fucking suck. Now maybe behind the set they're like, God, I can't believe I'm making Piranha 2: The Spawning, but I'm going to do my best. And the Sharknado, they're like, I can't believe we're making Sharknado. Who gives a fuck? And I keep picking on Sharknado, but that's just how I feel. B-movies used to actually feel like real movies. Just because it's a B movie doesn't mean it has to be bad, okay? And Piranha 2, now people are like, you're defending Piranha 2 by saying that. I enjoy it. I mean, like, the special effects are fun, the gore is fun, the characters are ridiculous, and although they're trying, even if they fail, you could tell that they tried, and it's enjoyable. Unlike Birdemic, which is trying, I think, question mark, but it's so poorly done that it just doesn't have anybody who knows what they're doing. So, like, this one, it's just essentially, Lance Hendrickson is the chief of, he's like a cop on this one. And, of course, the piranhas start attacking, picking people off. They can go on land. His ex-wife, or his wife, there's a strange wife, and her kid is there, too. They get caught up in it, so Lance Hendrickson's just trying to save everybody. There's another guy that's kind of courting Lance Hendrickson's wife, who's the main character, and he ends up being from, like, the old, like, place that worked on these kind of experiments. But there's some really fun, goofy moments. Like, there's these two girls that, like, trick this guy to bring him a bunch of food, and then they throw him in the water. And I was like, if they're going to kill this guy after treating him that poorly, but they don't. And I was like, that's kind of a relief. It's been years since I watched this, but I always remember kind of enjoying it. Yeah, it's stupid. You know it's stupid, but at least it's an honest attempt at trying, and it's enjoyable, gory, silly sequel to Piranha. And I even like the remake of Piranha. I never saw Piranha 3 Double D, but I did see the 95 TV remake of Piranha, and I remember being so-so, whatever, you know? So there's 5 Piranha movies, believe it or not. But anyways, I guess that Ovidio Asantanis had a hand in finishing this, like like a lot of the extra shots and changing some things around. So we have new 2K scan, new interviews with actors Ricky Paul Golden, and special effects artist Brian Wade, which is cool because that's the kid actor in here. He talks about, Ovidio shooting scenes for like an international version, and there's like naked girls and stuff like that with him. But anyways, it's a fun movie. It looks solid. It sounds solid. It's just a goofy, fun B movie. Check it out. Okay, speaking of Ovidio, we got to go to this one. Made in Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. And this is Madhouse. This is an Arrow release. This movie I love. This is the second birthday horror film of 1981, along with Happy Birthday to Me. So Madhouse, that's an amazing cover art too. So Ovidio directed this one. I just talked about Ovidio Asantanis. He also directed Tentacles. How could I forget Tentacles? But this the music in here is by Riz Ortolani, and a lot of it is reused stuff from Cannibal Holocaust. So some of that stuff is like reused, the primitive stuff, but it's different too. And there's also like kind of a nursery rhyme theme to it. So I love the score in here. I actually really like this movie. I think this is kind of one of the hidden gems of 1981. And I covered this years back. Rewatching it, it went up a little bit. So what we have here is this, I can't remember what her job is. She's basically a tutor to help deaf kids learn. And her birthday's coming up. And her uncle contacts her, and he's a priest. And he says, hey, listen, your twin sister really needs to see you. And she's dating this she's married to this professor. This college professor gives speeches, or doctor, he's a doctor. And the doctor's like, I never knew you had a twin sister. You never talk about her. It's like, because she traumatized me as a kid. We learned that they have this long, horrible history where this twin sister used to torture her with a dog, a pet dog, and all this kind of stuff. And the priest says, you should open up your heart to your sister. She really wants to see you, but I must warn you, she doesn't have long to live. She has a physical ailment that has scarred her. She no longer looks like you. And so she goes to visit her after all these years, and the sister grabs her and she gives her the pet cemetery treatment, right? Just freaks her the fuck out. And just says all these horrible things like, our birthday's in a few days. And it's really terrifying. And then pretty quickly, she escapes from this mental hospital. And people in her life start ending up dead. And some of them are being attacked by a dog, this Rottweiler, which is awesome. So basically the killer's using a Rottweiler to do it. And a lot of the people are picked off here and there. It gets really dark. The score is like has this primitive, awesome thing about it. Like I said, it's some reuses of Cannibal Holocaust, but it also has a new nursery rhyme kind of element to it as well. Rizzorlani kills it on the score. And I think the cast does a really good job, everybody involved. The priest in here is also excellent. I won't spoil everything here, but there's, of course, a birthday party scene where everybody's invited, kind of like Happy Birthday to Me. So it shares similarities, a lot of DNA with Happy Birthday to Me. I think they're both really good, though. It's gory, too. Of course, this made the video nasties list, believe it or not. I don't think rightfully so. There's a couple scenes that are pretty rough, but anyways, Madhouse is just great stuff. And the whole movie takes place in kind of like a big kind of like house that's broken up into all these different apartments. Not the whole movie, but a big chunk of it. That works really well. But yeah, it's just great stuff. Very, very creepy, very dark, and the ending I love. It's great stuff, Madhouse. So special features are you got commentary by Hysteria Continues, and you also have subtitles. And then you have Running the Madness, a brand new interview with actress Eden Ivey. Framing Fear, a brand new interview with cinematographer Roberto Della Torre Pizzazzoli. Ovidio Nasty, a brand new interview with producer-director Ovidio Adesantes, alternate opening titles. And you know what's cool about this is there's tons of these bizarre, weird, quirky characters that are around that work really well. So yeah, kind of reminds me of the Tenet in that aspect. I'm not the Tenet, the Sentinel, or it could be the Tenet. Either or is a weird kind of place with a bunch of quirky characters in a big building. But Madhouse, great stuff. Okay, next up is another one from 1981, and it's been years since I watched this movie, and this is Tobe Hooper's The Funhouse. Yeah! So this is the 4K I picked up. You know, it's been so long since I watched Funhouse that I popped this and I was like, I remember this being good. Don't remember it being great. And I'm looking at everybody's ratings. Oh, it's 3, 2.5, 3, 3.5. I'm like, oh, and there's a couple 4.5. So I'm like, huh. So I put this in and I start watching it, and immediately I'm like, I really like this. This is great. You know, so like, and watching it, you're like, yeah. So you like, obviously you watch Texas Chainsaw 1 and 2 and Eaten Alive, and you're like, yeah, Rob Zombie definitely lifted a lot from Tobe Hooper. It was definitely one of probably his favorite director. And then watching Funhouse, you're like, yeah, this is definitely something that Rob Zombie watched religiously, being like the Carnies aspect about this and all the Hooper styles. So like, it's very cool. So what we have here is there's this carnival, this traveling carnival that comes into town, and basically this family, this group of teens wants to go there. The dad tells them don't go. A younger brother kind of sneaks off to follow his sister, and what happens is this group of kids witnesses something horrible. They witness a murder from somebody that is mentally handicapped and physically deformed that kills this prostitute. Well, not really a prostitute, but there's a prostitution thing going on here, and kills her, and they witness it, and they steal the money, and they're trying to from these people, and they're trying to escape from this carnival after it's closed down at night. But of course, the carnival barker, who's the deformed person's father, and the deformed person are after them. There's this is Universal Pictures, so they throw like a lot of Universal imagery here. Like the young little brother's like a monster kid, and he's a monster kid before the Deadly Spawn. He's a monster kid before, Friday the 13th Part 4, right? Like the posters on the wall, all that kind of shit. Like we kind of dialed that back. A lot of people always give it credit to Friday the 13th 4, but there's ones way before that, right? So essentially, basically, there's so much universal iconography, like the mutated guys wearing a Frankenstein mask. You'll see the Wolfman poster, all that kind of stuff in the background, right? But the carnival aspect here is wonderful. The circus aspect, all that stuff is good. Carnival aspect is perfect. Now, Kevin Conway is in here, and last week I just talked about One Good Cop, and he plays the lieutenant. and he stole the show in that movie, and he steals the show in this fucking movie too. Kevin Conway from Oz and from a bunch of other films. He is tremendous in this movie. Now he plays 3 different roles, so there's 3 different kind of carnival barkers here. They all obviously must be related, but they all have different styles. One's like this tattoo, alive, alive, alive. Like, he's great. And then we have like the main kind of guy who's the father of the deformed monster, and then we have, of course, the kind of like British sophisticated one, and they're all different kind of barkers and everything. And the opening of the movie, they have this great shot that goes through and follows like a character walking through the carnival, and they end that too like that. So I was just like, yes. But it's just like, like the movies like Haunt or Hellfest, where you're running through the carnival and there's a killer after you. This is like one of the first ones that I could think of, and it's the best one to me. Like, and the killer's terrifying. The kids are picked off. It's basically in a how like Ghoulies 2 does the same thing, where you're going through this like haunted attraction and there's monsters or a creature after you or a killer. The killer's terrifying looking. You generally kind of feel sorry for him in a lot of aspects, but he's scary at the same time. And this also follows, 81 had a lot of these, 80, 81 had these movies where you have like these kind of, I don't want to say rudely, but deformed or monstrous kind of killers who are human, but they're messed up looking. Jason Voorhees made his appearance here as a grown killer, and you have Just Before Dawn. You have Hell Night. I think Humongous came out the year after, and before that you have other like deformed like kind of killers, like in what was the one, the Silent Scream in the basement. So like, is it the Silent Scream? Or is it the Unseen? The Unseen with the basement. So like the term was what they used back then. They would say mongoloid killer, right? Like, that's the kind of term they would always use back here. And then you have Madman and Cropsy. It's just a year of deformed killers. A couple years, 1980, 1982. There's just a million deformed killers out here. But I love this movie. Thought it was great. Thought the acting was great. Well done. Well produced. Well shot. Well directed. Score's great. So people are always like, Hooper could never direct Poltergeist. Like, yes, I know. It's a lot like a Steven Spielberg-produced movie. But hey, all the other Spielberg-produced movies are like that too. But this is a very capable, very well-done movie. And I think this is great. The kills are well-crafted. The suspense is great. The acting's great. The location's great. I love this. It's way better than I fucking remembered. I will watch this again. I'll probably maybe watch it around Halloween again. But no, Funhouse. Loved it. Loved it. Great stuff. Man, Hooper. Every time I rewatch Hooper movies, I get better. Hooper's creeping up on my top 50 favorite horror directors. I mean, like, I love Texas Chainsaw 1 and 2 and Eaten Alive and Funhouse. I like Life Force. I like Invaders from Mars. All those movies I like. What else is it? He doesn't have like a huge list of movies I love, but he has a good amount, right? Poltergeist I also like. I mean, come on, he's a good director. So as far as the special features are concerned, we have a new 4K scan, audio commentary with director Toby Hooper, moderated by filmmaker Tim Sullivan, and then the Blu-ray disc. Now I think you're saying, is it worth the upgrade? So we do, the 4K scan is on the Blu-ray too, but we have new interviews, which I love seeing. So we have some new interviews with actors Miles Chaplin and Wayne Duba, audio commentary Toby Hooper, moderated by Tom Sullivan. The Barker Speaks interview with actor Kevin Conway, which I loved seeing an interview with him. He recently just passed, unfortunately, but he has a lot to say about this movie. And like during the movie, like when he squares up to fight the one dude, like I was like, oh, there's no doubt in my mind that Kevin Conway whooped this guy's ass. But then like you see him in the interview, he's like, he was a big guy. And he's just like so smart. And like he's like, that dude's such a real actor. You can tell he's like a big theater actor. But on the movie, I couldn't tell. I thought he was like this hard and tough guy for real. Said sometimes Something Wicked This Way Comes interview with executive producer Mark Lester, Carnival Music interview with composer John Beal, audio interview with actor William Finley, who's also passed away, unfortunately. He has a great little scene in here. He's in Eaten Alive and Phantom of Paradise. Additional scenes added to network television broadcast version. So yeah, great stuff. Loved it. Looked great too. Sounded great in 4K. What is it? Dolby Vision. I think, what was it, a 5.1 mix on here? I can't remember, but I thought the sound was really good on here as well. Anyways, great stuff. We're going to follow up a classic director with another one here, and this is Deadly Blessing by Wes Craven, 1981, of course. This is a shame. It's a blind spot for me. I never watched Deadly Blessing. Don't know why. And the trajectory of Wes Craven's career is very strange, because we had, of course, Last House on the Left, 72, Hills Have Eyes, 77. There's a porno, I think, in between that. And then, of course, I think we had the TV movie, Summer of Fear, Invitation to Hell, if I'm not mistaken. And then 81, he has Deadly Blessing. After that, he has Swamp Thing in 82. And then he has Nightmare on Elm Street, 84, Hills Have Eyes Part 2, 84. Kind of goes on and on. So like, it's just such a strange trajectory of career. And a lot of of his movies were independent or TV movies, right? Before Deadly Blessing. This looks like, and I don't mean any disrespect to Last House on the Left and Hills Have Eyes. I love those movies. I love the do-it-yourself, like gritty. I love those movies. This seems like the first big professional movie he got. And it really does. James Horner's score, I was like, oh wow. And the cast, I mean, you got Ernest fucking Borgnine in here, who was one of my all-time favorite actors as a Mead Hydite. It's kind of like an extreme Amish person in The Religious. You got Michael Berryman, you got Sharon Stone. You got a really solid cast here, and it takes place in this kind of like isolated religious community, and some of the outsiders there. So the main character here is her and her husband. Her husband was excommunicated from this group because he left and married and came back, and after he got this land, and Ernest Borgnine is the patriarchal figure of this religious community. That's really uptight. They don't use electricity. They're very strict religious community, and they shun people away who don't. Michael Berryman plays like this half-wit, kind of like slow man who's basically a child at heart. And in the very beginning of the movie, he is like harassing this woman, this young girl, not super young, but girl. It's probably like teenage girl, about her pain and calling her the incubus, yada yada yada, chasing her. And you think Berryman's just a weirdo. This religious faction is strange and weird, and basically these people are on the outside of this community, and this community is super weird and bizarre. But before long, of course, people start getting picked off. First, it's the husband, and some friends come to kind of help this woman kind of get better. And then one is Sharon Stone. One of the girls starts to have her eye on one of the people of the community. But before long, more and more people are picked off, and there seems to be maybe a supernatural element to the film as well, until the very end, where you kind of realize there is or isn't, which I won't spoil, but it's completely fucking batshit ending, where I was like, excuse me? I said excuse me out loud, but I was like, that is bizarre. But, it has some of the Wes Craven stuff that we've grown to know. A lot of nightmares. Sharon Stone's character has a lot of nightmares with the spider and stuff like that, and that's really well done. I like that. I think that the atmosphere and suspense is really good, and it's got a strange feel. It still has that carryover, like where it feels partially like a TV film from the 70s, or not a TV film, a 70s movie, where it's like you'll see some horrible murder, then 10 minutes later there's like a girl running and some kids chasing her, and it has like this little house on the prairie style music, and you're like, it definitely has that like tonal, I wouldn't say bad thing, but a 70s kind of tone to it, but it kind of carries over. Borgnine kills it. Borgnine kills it in this movie. He is so good and so strict and so mean. It's like his dialogue, and he's like, "You serpent from hell." And it's just great. And I remember I read after Devil's Reign, 76, Borgnine really didn't want to do any more horror movies, but this is a horror film, but I don't know if anybody told you that. Obviously, poor Ernest Borgnine's passed away, but he's a tremendous actor. And Wes Craven talks on the commentary that he had a presence. He was a really cool guy, and he had a presence. It was great working with him. Sharon Stone's solid in it. You could kind of tell she's going to be a star in a lot of ways. There's some nudity in here, of course, girls getting in the shower, that kind of deal. Put in by the producers, according to Wes in that commentary. They recreate, this is kind of where the Freddy claw in the bathtub kind of originated from, with the snake. So like you see a lot of the stuff here, like Wes Craven has his Wes Cravenisms, and I love the fact that Wes Craven came from a very strict religious family, and this one he's kind of always gets a chance to like poke fun or kind of condemn that really religious, strict, family element, where he's kind of, and in Hills Have Eyes, you feel like he's killing his strict, like, conservative family, because he, growing up in that life. And then in, like, of course, People Under the Stairs, he's definitely making a comment on that kind of, those rich, kind of crazy people, family there. This one, I think he is too, that kind of strict. But at the end of this one, there's some truth. There's some truth to these people. So I always like that kind of aspect, which kind of makes me feel like it doesn't feel Italian, but that's definitely something that would happen in a Spanish or Italian horror film, where they condemn religion, but at the very end, religion still has like some sort of like definite like hold of the reality in the film, and it seems like it genuinely is right, partially, which is weird. But yeah, so Deadly Blessing, I enjoyed this. I thought it was really good. And creepy. So good stuff. I'm glad I watched it. Finally, I love watching stuff I haven't watched. So that's 2. And I've watched a couple I really liked from this year, but I really loved, for the first time, Dark Knight of the Scarecrow and Deadly Blessing. Good stuff. And revisiting Funhouse was a treat. So we have audio commentary by director Wes Craven, interview with actress Susan Bruckner, and writers Glenn M. Benist and Matthew Barr. So looks great, sounds great, have subtitles. Would recommend checking this one out. Loved it. Okay, next up is from another classic horror director, and that is Larry Cohen. This is Full Moon High, one of 5 werewolf movies, question mark. Now I know a lot of people don't consider Wolfen a werewolf movie from 1981, but you have The Howling, you have American Werewolf in London, you have Night of the Werewolf by Paul Naschy with Paul Naschy, and then you have a Wolfen, which is iffy. I know it's Native Americans turning into wolves, and then you have Full Moon High, directed by Larry Cohen, and this is kind of in the vein of Transylvania 5000 or 500, whatever you call it. In that, it's not really like it's a comedy first and then a horror movie. It's a spoof. It's got Alan Arkin's kid. What is it? Adam Arkin. Who else is in here? Ed McMahon is in here, of course. That's right. Yes, and he plays Adam Arkin's father. So Adam Arkin is going on this business trip, and it takes place originally in what? The 50s? Who's the president? Eisenhower. We jump over a bunch of time here. We have a bunch of different presidents, Eisenhower, JFK, and there's a nice shot where you kind of see the transition of time through the president's pictures on the walls. I like that. So it starts off in like the 50s kind of style America, right? I was a teenage werewolf kind of style setting, right? Where the America was very concerned about communist and all that kind of deal. So it's definitely making a statement on that, taking some air out of it, being very funny, because Larry Cohen grew up around these times. He knows this kind of thing. And I think Joe Dante probably would have been fit better to direct this movie, to be honest. This feels more like a Joe Dante kind of style film. But it is what it is. So, and Larry Cohen's a great director, a great filmmaker. So, I don't know, maybe because a lot of people hate this movie and they say it was the worst 81. I don't agree. I don't think it's a fucking masterpiece, but it's fun enough, right? It's fun. I've seen a lot of stupid, silly movies. The Year Before Mama Dracula, unwatchable. This much better. But we're talking Full Moon High here. So, Adam Arkin is bitten by a werewolf on a business trip with his father. His father's trying to get laid. That's all Ed McMahon concerns himself with, is stopping commies and having sex with random women. Adam Arkin is bitten by a werewolf, of course, and he doesn't know what's going on. Then all of a sudden, all the cheerleaders in the town start getting their butts bit. Yes, it's that kind of movie. It's very silly. One day, he starts to change into a werewolf. Ed McMahon is thinking it's like a teen like kind of problems, testosterone over limit, whatever. And Ed McMahon ends up dead. Adam Arkin decides to skip town. And what happens is he comes back years later and like what now that it's modern times and whatnot. And he is basically in the school. It's all wrecked down. He's going back to school. He plays as his kid. He plays as his kid, and he comes back and tells everyone he's his kid. All the people from his old hometown from the 50s are still there. They're older now. They're a little confused. Some people still have feelings for him. All this kind of stuff here. There's a lot of dated gay jokes. There's like three or four gay characters in here, two or three. They're just ridiculous. Of course, the coach, who now is the principal, is always trying to like grab ass kids in the shower. The bus driver is also just a eccentric homosexual character. Just this kind of outdated humor that you would expect from the early 80s, right? Very silly, very spoofy kind of humor as well. Alan Arkin does come into the movie, and he plays this kind of asshole doctor. He's pretty funny. So the movie's just silly. It's goofy. It's light. It's broad. Is it great? No. Is there a couple laughs? Yes. Is it Larry Cohen's worst movie? Debatable. I know a lot of people really don't like Return to Salem's Lot, but I don't know. It's probably comparable to Return to Salem's Lot. So there we gotta go. Full Moon High, entertaining enough. I laughed a few times. I don't hate it. I don't love it. It's really silly though. You'll know if you like this kind of stuff or not. Very light, goofy humor. Special features include audio commentary, director Larry Cohen, moderated by King Cohen filmmaker Steve Mitchell. So there we go. Okay, next up is the Patreon pick, and this is Bullitt from 1968, directed by Peter Yates, starring Steve McQueen. This is a Steve McQueen pack right here. Bullitt, Getaway, Cincinnati Kid. Steve McQueen, a classic actor, died in 1980. Last movie was The Hunter. Tragically died too, cancer. But he's an American icon, right? The Great Escape, The Magnificent Seven, just in a slew of movies, The Getaway, of course. So he's just a great actor. Papillon, Sand Pebbles, just a million movies, right? He's would have done a million more if he didn't die. But Bullitt is one of his most popular films, and he's a cop named Bullitt. And he is assigned to protect this witness. This witness is going to turn over. He is basically Robert Vaughn's primary witness here. Robert Vaughn, also from Magnificent Seven, Chud 2, Magnificent Seven. He was with Steve McQueen, so there we go, a connection there. And has this witness that needs protection because there is he's going to turn like evidence on this mob or something like that, and his life is clearly at stake here. So Steve McQueen is basically in charge of this. Him and a couple other cops, and they're taking turns. concerns. One day, while he's supposed to be watching him, somebody breaks in and it shoots this guy, messes him up really bad. And Steve McQueen starts to realize that something's not quite right? Something's fishy, something's rotten in Denmark. And he starts to put two to two together and realize that somebody's not telling the truth. And he starts to kind of investigate this entire thing. This leads to one of the most famous car chases around. It's really well shot. It's really well done. Steve McQueen's great in this. Steve McQueen's clever in this. He's a movie star, right? And they say things about Steve McQueen basically saying he did so much, so little. He barely talked in the fucking movies. He cut a lot of his lines out, but yet he somehow always comes across magnificently. He's just got great screen presence. He's an action star too at the same time. But and they talked about Bullitt recently on Quentin Tarantino's new podcast. And like, if you ask what Bullitt was about, like people would just be like, I don't know. I don't remember they just remember they like it, but they don't remember what the fuck it's about, right? But there's a couple other people in here. Norman Fell is in here. Simon Oakland is in here. Who else? I know I'm missing a couple of the big stars. Simon Oakland's great. He's in Psycho and The Hunting Party and Shadow's Land. And Norman Fell is in fucking, what is he? And he's mostly comedic, but this one he was a pretty serious actor, and I was kind of impressed by him here. But yeah, I thought the cast was really solid as well. And Don Gordon's in here from The Borrower. So like, I love the cast in here. The everything's good. The action's good. There's a lot of foot chasing, and it's way ahead of its time in terms of action and stuff. This would obviously lead to The Getaway a couple years later by Peckinpah, which is also a great car chase in there. Lots of great car stunts, and Steve McQueen did a lot of car shit in a lot of films like that. I don't have that much to say about it. Like, what do I say except that it's a really well done action movie with a really well casted film, and it's a lot of twists and turns, and I didn't exactly expect what was going on. And it's not a huge story. It's pretty contained. You know what I mean? It's just like a few people here. I mean, there's a chase through a airport, which is amazing and really nerve-wracking and kind of scary. But it just seems like really good procedural stuff, and the editing is unique for the time, for sure. But what I really liked about this release was I ended up popping in. There was a feature-length documentary about Steve McQueen, and you got to learn a lot about him. All these people talking about him, how he's a legend on screen and all these kind of things like that, and his film career and his life and his death and stuff. And you know what? I was reading also other things about McQueen, and McQueen, like, he's a hellraiser, man. It's interesting stuff. I don't know if I guess I would have kind of guessed a little bit, but not to that extreme, right? But, it's really tragic that he died so young, because, of course, we'd like to see him get in his old age and be in some more movies and just play different roles. You know, they talk about he was in Tom Horn and some other stuff later on in his career. And he did some interesting stuff, like with Peckinpah. Junior Bonner is a really interesting role. That's a good Peckinpah movie too. A rare non like kind of action movie. Is a drama, but it has like action and like the rodeo stuff. But it's a different kind of film. It's in the vein of a Ballad of Cable Hogue by Peckinpah. But anyways, this is a great film. Like I said, not much to say about it, but I enjoyed it, and I would watch again for sure. I need to watch The Cincinnati Kid when I get a chance. So yeah. All right, let's get these questions, comments, concerns, all that stuff. Martine VP, what an epic intro for 1981. Good job. Thank you. Tempo Tapas, good episode, Dave. I like the 1981 intro video. Thank you. Mike Moore, another great video as always, Dave. Had one of your first 100 videos pop up, so I watched it. And I got to say, the VHS Voyage was a really cool segment. Would be cool if it returned. Just saying. Haha. Cheers, bro. Yeah, that would be cool. This is, although could understand with all the crazy releases the past few years, that might be damn near possible. But if you still have a small stack of VHS that never made it to disc, would be pretty sweet to see them. Yeah, I just showed one, Intruder Within. And then we have Stephen Hyde. He just puts a smiley face. Thank you. Ken Coakley, last Friday I stumbled upon a film I hadn't seen in almost 40 years. It was Meatballs Part 2. It was directed by Ken Shockwaves Wiederhorn. The movie featured Paul Rubens, aka Pee Wee Herman, and he was hilarious in the movie. Oh, wow. He goes on, but man, I used to watch Meatballs 2 on television. So funny. Donald Gibb at the very end, the alien. Who farted? Man, that movie's so silly. As an aside, I met Ken Wiederhorn at my local cinema for a midnight screening of Shockwaves, and he was really cool. He had a table after the movie and didn't stop until everyone got their merch signed. I couldn't come up with a pick for the worst of 81. I guess I would have to go with Piranha 2. They kind of lost me at Flying Fish. I like it, like I just said. I actually liked Omen 3, The Final Conflict, as it got me into Sam Neill. It had flashes of brilliance. I liked the way they filmed Damien's speech to his disciples of the Watch, and I really liked the ending when Damien drops to his knees before Jesus and says, Nazarone, Nazareth, or is it Nazarene? I would know. And you have won nothing. Boy, talk about a sore loser, but the ending was spectacular. Being a Christian, I like seeing Jesus win handily. I also like the Rossano Brazzi from Frankenstein's Castle Freak, as well as Ruby Wax from Shockwaves, as well as Don Gordon. Very cool. Love Don Gordon. Just talked about him from Bullitt. Nope, here we go. Almost lost my thing there. Okay. Nick Bua. After another intriguing review, I'll probably pick up Graduation Day. It looks like a fun slice of 80s horror. The 1991 intro is the thing of beauty for sure. Do you do wedding videos too, or do you prefer bloody divorce proceedings, sir? If you pay me, I'll make anything. Questions. Why do you think the 80s have such staying power? Why not the 20s, the 20s, or I think he means the 00s or the 90s? I don't know. I think that possibly the people making movies now are the people who probably grew up in the 80s, or it just was a special time in culture. I don't know. The special effects were at an all-time high. The video stores were there. Kids don't really go to video stores anymore. I think video stores created nostalgia, but it's really hard to say. And you're around my age, so people have nostalgia for the 80s. Maybe people younger will have nostalgia for the 90s and so forth. I have nostalgia for certain 90s things, so it's just an age, I think. Have you seen any recent horror anthologies you liked, or is it subgenre Dead and Buried? Or is this subgenre Dead and Buried? I'm sure I did. Off the top of my head, some people like the new Scare package. I only saw part 1. I was fine with it. Geez, Mortuary collection. Mortuary, yeah, it's on Shudder. That came out a couple years ago with Clancy Brown. Great stuff. Made my top 10 that year. And you said you'll be tackling every year the 80s. Does that mean we'll see Mrparka in some vintage 80s wear? Garnish tracksuits, shoulder pads. She'll be growing a mullet, right? Enjoy exploring all these movies from bygone era. I try to do the same as often as I can. We'll just do some shoulder dancing. That's the whole thing. I'll just shoulder dance when I do reviews. That's the 80s quintessential dance right there. So I guess we're going to hop into this update. All right, let's hop into this update. Got my Vinegar Syndrome order. So first up is The Flesh Merchant, and this is from Culture Shock. So I like what they're doing. This one looks pretty odd, as do all their titles, to be honest. Okay, yeah, it looks wild. Joe Estevez, Don Stroud, Michelle Bauer. Could be interesting. Joe Estevez, that's right. Next up, we have the Assassination of the Tsar with Malcolm McDowell, and this is what, from Canadian International Pictures or Deaf Crocodile. There's so many sub-labels now that I'm starting to get confused by all of them. But I usually just kind of go through every month and see what sounds interesting and pick out a few that I definitely want to check out. You can't get them all now. It's just a lot. But yeah, this looks interesting enough. This is the Canadian International Pictures one. This is Gina, which I actually had never really heard of. But I guess something caught my fancy on this one. Yeah. A film both human and brutal. Yeah, this one, I remember it was a revenge flick. That's why I picked it up. So, yeah, I usually go through and read them, and then half the time they show up, I'm like, I don't remember what the hell this is. We have a first Vinegar Syndrome one up here. And this is, of course, a 4K upgrade of Primal Rage, an Italian killer weird bamboo movie monster thing. This movie's fucking bonkers. I covered this a while back. She'll Bring Out the Beast in You. This is a weird film. This in 4K is just kind of mind-boggling, to be brutally honest, but I love the cover art here. Great stuff. Vinegar Syndrome was putting out the craziest 4Ks. I can't believe it. I do love it, though. Can't get enough. It's gory and weird and bizarre and just silly. I think a lot of people will dig that one. Next up, we have Shaolin Invincibles from EGFA, and it also has, what's the other one? 7 to 1. These are two kind of, I think, low-budget martial arts flicks. I don't know too much about. I kind of dig the EGFA stuff, so I pick it up. But, yeah, this looks fucking weird. Fighting a gorilla on there. Gotta love it, right? What's up next? Next up, this is what I've been meaning to watch. Who put this out? Fun City. This is Breathless with Richard Gere. Yeah, it's a remake of the classic one. Yeah, never saw the original. I know. It's criminal, right? But yeah, heard good things about this one, actually. Definitely check this out when I get a chance. Then we have, from Saturn's Core, Guilty Pleasures. They kind of specialize in SOV and low-budget cinema. One building, two women, 1,000 screams. Pretty cool. Then right here we have Freeway 2 Confessions of a Trickbaby on 4K. That's insane. I have the old Blu-ray of this one, but yeah, we're going 4K with this. Now we have both Freeway movies in 4K, which is really cool. The first one's great. I love the first one. The second one's wild too. Both by Matthew Bright. Is this an extended version or something like that? I wonder if there's a different version of this one. Yeah. But yeah, anyways, I would definitely rewatch it. I prefer the first Freeway, though, for sure. Okay, finally this bad boy came in. City of the Living Dead 4K from Cauldron Films. Love this movie. Great film. Finally in 4K. That back cover art is badass. If nobody's ever seen City of the Living Dead, I highly recommend you do it. 1980 classic. You have some stickers here. Those are very cool. And you have a poster. I hope it's original Gates of Hell on there. And then you have a CD soundtrack by Fabio Frizzi. Wonderful. I love this movie if you guys haven't realized that yet. One of my favorites. Long Live Fulci. One of my all-time favorite directors. My second favorite. Then we have Calvaire, which is a great Belgium horror film. This director actually did 3 films for Brice de Wiets. What's his name? De Weiss. And Calvaire is a great movie. Very crazy about this guy who's forced. I don't want to get into it, but it's basically kind of, I guess you'd call it Hicksploitation done in a Belgium French extreme style. But great movie. Calvaire. Finally, at a stateside Blu-ray from Yellow Veil. We've been waiting for that one for a while. And then last but certainly not least, we have Mexican Gothic, the films of Carlos Enrique Taboada, which has a movie on here I've been meaning to watch for years. So it has 3 films on here. Rapina, Darker Than Night, Poison for the Fairies. I've been meaning to watch Poison for the Fairies forever, from '86, I believe. But yeah, it's got a nice booklet in here. It's got this double... basically thing here, the double case. You got the big case and you got an outside case, but 3 films in here. Very cool. Excited to watch Poison for the Fairies. But yeah, that's the update. We're gonna hop back to that video. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching, and as always, have a good one.